Hello and welcome to Penny for a Tale. My name is Mitchell, and we today are playing Degenesis here at Penny for a Tale. But enough gilly nilly. Let's introduce the other players as well as the GM tonight. So I'll let them take it off.
All right, so I am Nerdy Nursey. I am, this is my first time playing Degenesis. Usually I play on my Twitch channel, Nerdy Nursey, old school Nintendo games, retro games, um, and I am a health and wellness panelist. I've done panels at TwitchCon and GexCon, and I'll hopefully be doing more of those in the future. So I'm very passionate about the improvement of my fellow gamers' lives. And so on my channel, you can usually find me in between uh, gaming sessions, teaching about exercises you can do for physical health, mental health, and all other sorts of things. So that is my passion, and that's what I really love to do. And I'm very excited to be here participating in this because it seems so awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Jasmine.
Hello, I'm Jasmine. I usually play a game here or there with Penny for a Tale. On my channel, I run a convention advice and creative channel, so we do a lot of things like this. We also play a lot of first person shooters and puzzlers and just general fun, scary things over there. Uh, Kind of on a semi hiatus again. So check the Twitter to make sure I'm streaming today or not. Either way.
And for those watching, if you are curious about checking out their channels, feel free, if you're watching on YouTube, to look over in the details as well as the podcast. And of course, on the chat here, we will have their information up soon. So, Kyle, why don't you bring us home?
All right, I'm Kyle. I work with Six More Vodka, the creators of Degenesis, on, well, most prominently, the upcoming Artifacts book is my baby. Um, and I love it, and it's going to be great. Um, and I'm totally not biased in any way for that. Um, but I am running the game for Degenesis. I'll be at PAX Unplugged, fingers crossed. Got that sorted out just yesterday. So hopefully, unless I get horribly, terribly ill, I will actually be running demos at PAX Unplugged. So if people want to play Degenesis and try it out in person, you will get a chance to. All right, that does it for the introductions, right?
Yeah. Go ahead and give the
Right.
recap and shoot us on in.
So recap of last session, which was also our first session. So you're not missing anything. Um, the party arrived at the outskirts of Justitian, which is sort of the capital city of the Protectorate. And the Protectorate is sort of hard to define. It's not really a country, it's run by the judges who are, you know, they always are described as like a mixture of Judge Dredd and Solomon Kane by people who see the game. So they're sort of law enforcement focused, sort of traveling lawmen with their capital city called Justitian is like a testament to their will and the rule of law. Um, and the party arrives at Justitian, where unfortunately for them, they do not have the required passports and the required paperwork to actually enter the city. And with winter coming, that could be a pretty serious issue because winter's in Borka, which is modern day Germany generally, get pretty brutal. And so while they were there, they were talking to a number of people, and eventually they talked to Jordis, who's a judge, and she gave them a mission. Um, she's one of the judges for a region called the Rubble, and the Rubble is this farmland that surrounds Justitian. And it's not terribly ideal farmland, but it's what they've gotten. They have genetically modified plants and stuff that they use to try and overcome all the problems with the soil and all the really awful weather conditions around um, Justitian. And one of the farms had looked like it was going to have a wonderful harvest, and then when harvest season came, the crops were all poisoned or diseased in some way, and no one really knows what's going on. And normally that would be something that the judges would investigate, but with the winter coming, Jordis is stuck sort of at the gates of Justitian, watching for ne'er-do-wells and troublemakers who are trying to get into the city. So instead of doing their normal thing, they've got her on that. So she made a deal with the party that if they go out and solve this problem for her, she will, in exchange, ensure that they get a chance to enter the city. She'll give them the paperwork and clear them so that they can go into Justitian. At that point, they went out to the rebel, and their sort of point person is Wald. And Wald is a village juryman. Sorry, I've got background noise. And Wald is sort of like a deputy to the judges, is, I guess, the best way to describe him. And Wald's celebrating the harvest when the party arrives, so he invites them all to the feast. And we're going to pick up in the morning after the feast. So the feast obviously is, sort of a high point in an occasion. But in the morning, the house is like dead quiet in the early hours of the morning. Except for you hear sort of off, not terribly distantly, but sort of muffled. You think maybe sounds of, you're not sure, like maybe someone hitting something with a hammer or wood striking wood. You're not entirely sure what.
I'll get up and kind of peek under my bed for Teague.
Like, I'm across the way.
Oh, hey, Teague, are you hearing that?
Oh, the sound. So Teague's gonna get out from underneath her bed and go up against the door and try to see if she can hear if it's coming from outside the room.
It sounds like it's coming from down the hallway. It's not coming from, like, you're in. The building is built really sturdily. Like, its walls are maybe even like a foot thick of stone. So I mean, it's built almost like a fortress more so than a standard mansion. But you can tell that it's definitely coming from inside, not outside. Like you can go over to the window and it doesn't, it's not outside, it's inside the building, or at least it's coming from down the hall if it's not,
Oh, down the hall.
But even then it's like distant, it's not like someone's in the hallway. And as you're
what do you think, Teague? Is this something we should be concerned about?
Just in case, we should try and wake everyone else.
Yeah, I was hoping to sleep in, but Gamal gets up and puts on a shirt and his robe as well before stretching out and then heading over to the door, and he's gonna open it and peek down the hallway.
So when you open the door, you actually see Heinrich, Wald's butler, and he is actually heading towards your room.
Hey, Heinrich, that noise, what's that about?
He says, "Well," he says, "it's sparring." Um, he says, "It's Elise always has some of the local militia in to spar
Oh,
um, and train and drill before winter."
I see. Well, if she wants to test her mettle against someone pretty good, I suggest Teague over here.
Me?
Yeah, Palers. I'm sure you guys have talented in close quarters combat.
No, we're more in information than physical. What about her? So T goes back over to the bed where uh
Our dear
Mamura.
apocalyptic.
is Mamurana with us? Or is she being introduced later?
What do you think, Kyle?
I think it works either way.
Yeah,
There's no reason she couldn't just be with you guys. But if you want to have her
yeah.
introduce
We can.
later, it works either way.
Maybe this is actually a good point for her to come in, just kind of into the building, and um, you know, it's kind of easy to find the other Anubian.
Yeah, tracking Anubians in
Yeah.
the vicinity of Justitian is not difficult.
Have you seen an Anubian who might be with a Paler? It's unique. um,
So yeah, so I'll just come in, but I'll just mostly be ignoring the noise because it doesn't really bother me. I've heard it a bunch of times, but I'm definitely not a brawler. I'm a healer, so I just stay back. It's mostly like nuisance noise, nothing that I really pay attention to.
hey, Mumarada, I don't know if you've met a Paler before, but Teague,
Yes.
yeah, introduce yourself. In that charismatic way Palers do.
And she just kind of tilts her head and I don't know what you mean. We know each other already. Uh, so scuttle over to Namara and just uh, tap her on the leg. You awake? No? Tap tap tap. Yeah. We're gonna go see the sparring people. Okay. Bye bye. I'm gonna go through the door and follow Heinrich if he shows me where the sparring is.
Yeah. So once you're all sort of getting a move on,
Mm-hmm.
Heinrich leads you. They're actually sparring in the Great Hall, which was the same place the feast was held last night. And you see about a dozen men and women. A few of them are obviously Anabaptists. They're wearing the robes. They've got the face tattoos and the nose rings that mark Anabaptists. But there are also a handful who are clearly just like local clanners, and not, like really trained fighters. They're just sort of practicing with them. Uh, and you also notice Elise, who is the sister of Ada, Wald's wife. Um, she didn't really talk to people at the feast last night. She was there for part of it, and then she left pretty quickly. Um, when people started talking about like the Mohammedans and the farm, uh, and she has a shield on one arm and a one-handed sword in her other hand. And she's sort of every once in a while she'll walk over to one of the fighters and give them instructions on how to hold their weapon, or you know posture. One of the Anabaptists who's sparring is this massive man who keeps sort of just trouncing his opponents. Dang that, my hair keeps falling in my face. Um, uh, anyway, she sort of walks over to him and, you know, sort of sizes him up a little and like corrects his posture because he's not really fighting right. But when she sees you, she sort of nods to recognize your presence.
Hey, good morning.
She says, "Good morning to you as well."
I see you're pretty busy this morning. I wish we could become involved, but none of us are really. We wouldn't add anything.
She says, "You could always learn."
You know what? Sure. I wouldn't mind throwing in for a couple rounds.
All right. So, fortunately for you, she recognizes that you're not part of her militia, and she goes easy on you. She's clearly got like experience as a fighter. Even though she has a limp in her leg, she moves pretty quickly during a fight. And you see her just, you know, whether she's fighting you or she's fighting, sparring with one of the other fighters, she is just maybe a whole level above everyone else.
Yeah, and I fight with the grace of someone with 0 dots in brawl.
Yeah, she's well trained. You don't really remember much, but there was some reference made to her fighting in Precare. So, if that's true, she would have had at least some experience in actual combat. And while you're sparring with her, you hear a thud, and the big Anabaptist has knocked his sparring partner to the ground. And Elise walks over to him, sort of indicates that she's going to take him on. And, he sort of like smirks at her. And they sort of, square up for the duel. And you watch as like he has a two-handed sword, and it's it's a wooden sword, it's a training sword, but it's still a big two-handed sword.
Yeah.
Like the Anabaptists, their sort of trademark weapon is a Biden-hander, which is like a claymore. It's a two-handed sword that often they're as tall as the person wielding them. And he takes it and he just raises it over his head, preparing to strike. And Elise charges in, basically checks him with her shield, knocks him to the ground, and with her sword still in her hand, she punches him in the face like 3 times. You hear his nose snap as she just pummels him. And she says, "Sparring is not for hurting your opponent." And stands back up. She's got a limp in her leg, so it takes her a few seconds to get back to her feet. But she says, "I think that's enough for today." And walks off, leaving the Anabaptist just sort of sprawled out on the ground, clutching his face.
I'll go up to him and be like, if he asks politely, and I'll kind of motion to Mumarada. She might be able to help you out with that shiner there.
He just sort of like grunts, and he manages to get himself unsteadily to his feet and like storms off. The Anabaptists are not known for losing gracefully. Um,
I'm here if he needs it, but
Yeah.
you can't help people who don't want to help themselves.
It's like children they are.
Very large, very lethal children. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's gonna scuttle up to Elise. Quick question, if you have time, please.
She says, "Sure." She's taking her shield off, and you can see like where her hand has like all of the fingers on her left hand are missing. Like the thumb's cut off at the first joint, and the rest have just got similar damage. Or like just even at the like base of the palm.
So how well do you know Ada?
She says, "She's my sister."
Oh, now I see. And then Teague just kind of leans in really close. You look. Oh, I see. Your family. You look very, very similar. Good.
She says, "Don't pretend." She says, "I know that most people can't see the family resemblance." She says it's different lives that fled.
Understandable. Were you in the war before too?
She says, "Yes, I fought in Pregare for." She says, "Well, different people count it different ways." And she has like a wooden gauntlet that she wears over her injured hand. And she straps it on so that it's there, so that she can still sort of kind of use it. She says, "I fought for." So I was in Pregare for 5 years.
So that's how you lost. She kind of motions to her own hand.
She says, "Yes." She says, "It was a senseless war, but I fought in it nonetheless." She says, "I take it you're new to Justitian?"
Yes. The weather is very nice and things. Do you know Walt too? How well you know Walt?
She says, "Well, he is my brother-in-law." She says, "We grew up together." We're not super close, but I live here in the mansion, so I know him probably as well as anyone other than Ada.
Do you know his other habits sometimes? Has he done anything strange lately?
She Elise sort of scoffs. She's like, "Everyone around here is strange."
Well, stranger. more like in how you say, in terms of money, has he done something strange with money lately?
Elise shrugs. She says, "I don't really pay too much attention to Wald's finances. He makes a killing in his work as a juryman. But I don't really dig into it that much."
And then I'm gonna go back over to Ball. Was that your character?
Yeah, Gamal.
Gamal. Me like, you try. I'm not very good with interrogation.
I mean, I don't know if we need to interrogate. I'm really more interested in checking out the farm itself, getting my hands dirty, so to speak.
Good. We should. Could could Heinrich show us the farm, or is it too soon?
Yeah, we can ask always. And I'll go see Heinrich.
So Elise is listening on your conversation. She says, "I'll take you to the farm."
Oh, thank you, Elise. I really appreciate that.
She says, "No problem. I don't have a whole lot else to do here." She says, "If you're hungry, there's probably some bread in the kitchen." Here in my face again.
I'll grab a bread.
Uh, so Elise sort of waits for you to look like you're ready, um, and you notice that she picks up a sword from sort of like, um, yeah, I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it for the people who weren't here or weren't watching session one. Like the entry is at like a corner of the building,
Mm-hmm.
and there's off like directly across from that there's a hallway that leads down to like living quarters and whatnot. And then also to the right there's living quarters, and like down that hallway is where the guest quarters are, and at sort of intersection there's the great hall. But off to the side there's a chapel. And Elise goes to the chapel and grabs a sword and sort of straps it to her hip. Um, she waits for you. She says, "Hilda's farm isn't far from here, um, but we might be there a while. So if you have anything you need, you should get it now."
I mean, all right. I'll go grab my backpack and stuff upstairs.
I think I'm just gonna grab my. I don't think I really had a whole lot. Maybe my little bag, and stuff a couple of loaves of bread in there and just start nibbling on it while we're waiting.
I have had my stuff. I don't leave my stuff. So I just kind of give Gamma a look like, you didn't take your stuff? Like, crazy? But I don't know.
I mean, it's upstairs in my room. I just, it was a long trip. My feet hurt. I just don't want to walk with that heavy stuff anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess a couple more miles won't hurt me. Let's head out then.
So you head out, and Elise turns to the Nubians and she says, "I've heard people say that your people walk on the edge between life and death. Is that true?"
Yeah, for the most part. The things that we've seen would astonish, surprise, and might terrify you at times, but there are things between heaven and earth that you have yet to see, and we've explored it thoroughly.
She says, "I think you'd find that I'm harder to surprise than you would expect."
Yeah.
She says, "But nonetheless," she sort of drifts off. She says, "This is your first time in Justitian, right?"
Yeah, and Borka overall. I'm from Hyberspania, and for the most part, born and raised there.
She says, "Then I should warn you that things here are not always as they seem."
Are they ever?
"No, I suppose not. I suppose things are never as simple as they might seem on the surface. But," she says, "Justitian is not as safe and as stable as the judges would like you to believe it is."
Well, it's not Africa, that's for certain. But we're here, and I look forward to eventually getting into Justitian, exploring the people out for myself.
She says, be very careful if you do go into the city. She says, in the winter you can't leave. As well, you can. They're not going to stop you, but good luck getting anywhere before you freeze to death.
Does Decision harbor any ill will towards the Anubians or the Palers?
She pauses for a moment. She says, I cannot speak from personal knowledge, so forgive me if my answer is not in depth. But this is a bad season to bring change to Justitian. There are always those there who fear outsiders.
That's fair. I guess if anything happens, we'll always be the scapegoats they want. I appreciate the warning, though.
She nods and continues. Of course, the chroniclers and my people have never seen eye to eye, so maybe I am unduly judgmental of them. But do not trust those you meet in Justitian. The city is a den of wickedness at best.
Ah. I mean, if it matches the rumors I've heard, I'm excited to hear that it is what I thought it was.
She says, certainly. She says, the judges probably won't give you any reason to fear, but the chroniclers are always. She says, they're not trustworthy.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, the economic war between the drafters and the Dinars.
She says, of course, she says, I had forgotten about that. She says, if they think you're working with the Neo-Libyans, they will find a way to have you killed. Don't let their words and their pretenses fool you. They are still willing to kill those who get in their way, just as everyone else is.
Then the snakes. Exciting.
So as you continue, she sort of complains about the chroniclers some more. You gather that there's some bad blood between the Anabaptists and the chroniclers.
Yeah, I'll jump in and like complain about the chroniclers too. Because, you know, there's always something to complain about the chroniclers.
She says, yeah, she says, we don't get that many Anubians here in the city itself. She says, you might have better luck at the Spital if you're looking for something.
Yeah, actually, I was hoping to speak with many of the battalions in Justitian and around the area, specifically for Murata. She's a healer, and I'm sure the two might benefit with an exchange of information.
Elise nods.
But we have to get there first.
Yeah, first is investigating these damn crops, figuring out what the hell's going on, and getting our ticket inside.
She says, you want my opinion?
Always.
She says, I'm going to blame the chroniclers for it.
Wow. We're not paid to jump to conclusions. I'd like to see this through, if I may.
She says, certainly. She says, you'll hear people blame the Jahamidans, but it's not the Jahamidans' way.
I agree. I mean, if I had to shoot in the dark, I would bet a chronicler had something to do with it.
But like you said, not everything is as it seems.
It could very well be a Paler who did it.
Elise just casts a suspicious glance at Teague, like, um, but then you arrive at the farm and you see a woman standing outside a hut, sort of looking over the crops.
At least, do you mind introducing us?
She says, "Certainly." Uh, you're still maybe like 50 meters away when
Mhm.
Elise just shouts, Hilda. Um, and the woman turns to look at you. Um, and there's sort of like an awkward 30 seconds or so before you arrive in sort of good conversation distance. Um, and she waves at, or Elise waves at Hilda and says, "Good afternoon." Well, good morning. Says, "I've brought some people to help investigate the um, crops." And Hilda is she's the same age as Elise and Ada and Wald, but she looks much older. She's thin and drawn out, and you know, not frail or feeble by any means, but certainly maybe a little more worn and burned out. Um, and she just sort of stares at you for a moment. Her hair blowing in the wind, um, her sort of homespun clothes, sort of, you know, just sort of like a little bit more worn and tattered than you'd expect. Like she's not really even taking care of herself perhaps as well as she could be. Um, and Elise turns and says, "These are some people that have been asked by the judges to look into your crops." Uh, she says, "There's Teague and Mumarada and Gamal," and she points to each of you as well. Not really points. She like gestures with her hand, her good hand, not her wooden hand, at each of you, um, in turn, so that people know who is being referred to. And she says, "If there's anything you need, you can ask them for help." Um, and Hilda sort of nods and says, "Thank you." Um, she says, "As I'm sure you can see," she motions out at the field, and you see the grains that were growing have like not fully collapsed, but where they should have been growing, straight and tall, they're like blackened, and they, like they like curve and twist at angles as they grow out of the ground. She says, "Just a few weeks ago, everything happened, and now the crops are all dead."
I see. Ah, any changes in the weather? Any new people coming onto the farm since then?
Hilda nods. "No," she says. "At least nothing unusual for this time of year." She says, "Gideon helps me with a lot of the work around the farm. Uh, he says the Mohammedans did it." And Elise sort of tenses up. Um, and Hild looks at her and it's like, "I know you don't think the Mohammedans did it. Um, but, honestly," she says, like the Mohammedans have all gone into town already, or they've gone out with their flocks to places where they can weather the winter better. She says, "I don't think they were even really still around when, the crops were poisoned."
Oh, see ya. Thank you for the subscribe. Woo. So I'll take out the soul stones out of my pocket and kind of move them about in my hands. These kind of volcanic molten rock, like glass drops. Um, it was believed that when um, when the asteroids first burned up everything, that these things carried the souls of everything they burned up. It'll help us in figuring out exactly what happened here. Um, but if there's any information that any of you two might have that could assist in bringing out the truth of this, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Neither of the women seem to have anything that they know that they haven't already told you. They seem pretty sort of like when you start talking about asteroids and soul stones, they like their eyes sort of glaze over, like they have no clue what the heck you're talking about. um they've got fairly limited understanding of the world. Elise maybe has a little bit more than Hilda does, but Hilda is, like a backcountry farmer, and just because she's near Justitian, which is relatively urban and cosmopolitan, she's never even seen, any African, much less a Nubian, in her life. And so she just sort of watches you go around, and what are you gonna do to try and look into the crops?
So I'd like to just kind of get in close to the earth and start investigating, kind of using science, see if I can taste any alterations to the chemicals, or maybe if I have something that would provide some insight into what exactly happened to the soil or to the plants to make them die like that.
All right. So what in particular do you want to do first? I need a little bit more detail.
I'll bend down and just taste the soil first.
All right. The soil here is bad. Um, like really bad. Almost all of the soil around here is barely really worthwhile for growing crops in. Um, and the people of Borca don't really practice crop rotation. They only have a few things they can grow in this climate, and so they don't have that luxury. Um, and there's a lot of salt as well. But from what you've gathered, that's sort of natural in this area. Like it's a challenge the farmers have to deal with, but there's always, this is not a good place for growing plants. But you don't make a perception test.
All right.
Please.
Okay. I got 5 dice. Come on. 2 successes, 1 trigger.
All right. So you notice there's maybe a little hint of sulfur. And it could be from the plants dying off, depending on how they're decaying and what they're giving off. But you don't think it did. You think that something was added to the soil, maybe. So but you're not.
Yeah.
You're not entirely sure what.
Yeah, I'll get up and look around. A preliminary examination makes me believe that something was added to the soil. also these crops, this area, it's not a great place to be raising these sort of things. I'm surprised. I'm surprised this farm has stayed on as long as it has. To be honest.
So Elise is wandering with you, and she says, "The Spital gives us seeds that can grow in these conditions. Um, every once in a while, they change up the crops, but at the end of each year, they'll buy them back from us, and they'll sort of assess the crops, see which ones grew best, and those will be the ones that will be planted next year. And then the ones that were less successful, they'll use as food.
Mm.
So that's like the bread we made this morning is from the crops that didn't do as well as the others.
Oh, yay.
She says, though, actually, we don't use the same grain supply as Justitian. The battalions don't care to monitor the grain out here like they do there.
What are you thinking, Teague?
So Teague's gonna take out a little chunk of the bread that she took from the house before, and scuttle up to Hilda and ask her, "Did you have any bread like this here?"
She says, "No, why?"
Have an idea. Can you show me where you keep your farming equipment?
She says, "Yes." She takes you to. She has like her house is sort of a simple wooden, not even really a cabin so much. It's boards of wood sort of nailed together with pitch and tar to sort of keep out the wind. And she's already boarded it up for winter. She's planning on going into the city if she can, or maybe weathering the winter at Bald's place.
Is there any way for me to kind of search through?
Oh yeah, sorry. The door's open. But she has a shack next to it as well that has. It's not nearly as well built, but it has sort of some tools and stuff in it.
So, just from where we're standing, is there a way to see the rest of the field? Does it stretch that far back, or is it kind of like in its own?
The field is. The field's large, but it's sort of. It's down a little from where the house is. Like it's sort of. It's not. There's like a. The path and the houses are built on a little bit of like high ground around the fields, so you can see over all the fields from where you're standing.
Okay. So I turn back to Hilda and ask, how do you water all these plants?
She says, well, when we're lucky, there's rain. But when there isn't, she says, we'll go and fetch water from the wells.
Okay. And so I'm going to go back over to the farm equipment and use... Oh, I don't think I can... Can I use that?
Only one way to find out.
So I wanted to use my I guess primal to kind of see if any of these tools are not being used the way they're supposed to be.
That would probably be a perception.
Perception?
However, it's simple enough you don't even really need to roll for it. The tools are not in great shape, but it's clear that Hilda knows what she's doing. They don't appear to have been misused in any way, and they all look, I mean, clean in the sense that, um, I mean, they're farm equipment. They're dusty and dirty and everything, but you don't see any like traces of any contaminants or anything on them. Um,
Okay. Knowing that now, I go back to Hilda and ask her to show me where the well is so I can use my
she says,
medicine.
certainly. Probably science or perception, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So Hilda says, the well's up this way, and it's actually quite a far distance from where she is. She says, yeah, Gideon will take a cart and load up like a barrel full of water so that we don't have to make a bunch of trips. Gideon has an old horse that the judges didn't take because they're so ancient. It's such an ancient old workhorse that the judges, even though they'll take everyone's horses, they didn't bother with it. It's just like an ancient beast. She says, but anyway, the well is actually like closed off now. It's got like a barred gate, and you see sort of like a Spitalian emblem by the gate. She says during the farming season, the Spital makes sure that the water here is clean and everything. It's also next to a large like silo that has the Spitalian 8-pointed star on it.
So can we test the water real quick?
Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a way into the well. She says, unfortunately, the Spitalians lock up the place when they're not around.
Teague, can you open it?
Can I open it? Let's see.
Probably agility, dexterity, but you might be able to use intellect, science, or artifact lore to try and mess with. Well, no, probably not artifact lore to mess with the lock.
Okay, well, I have 0 in science, so that's a 0.
Do you have dexterity?
You just force it?
Nope, I have nothing in dex. So.
I can. What's the intellect roll to try to open it? Or did you say science?
Yeah, science.
Yeah, I'll try. So I got 7 dice for that.
And then I've got 3 intellect, but I have 1 engineering.
4 successes, 3 triggers.
All right. So the lock on the gate is more for show than for practicality. Of course, the Spital will also murder anyone they catch messing with the water supply. Though, is it really a murder? If but anyway, philosophical questions over whether it's murder or not aside, the Spital relies more on fear and the threat of violence to protect it than the lock itself. And you're able to figure out that if you shimmy in the it's like a padlock. If you shimmy in one of the if you put like shim in one of the openings, you can like undo the latch and it'll pop open.
Excellent. All right. Shall we? Let's get to work.
Hilda sees you do this and she's like just like terrified. She's like, you probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about it, right?
He's just gonna hop right on in.
If there is really something wrong here, this is the only way to find out.
Yeah.
Like in the modern day, you would suggest giving Hilda like a paper bag so that she could breathe into to calm down. Like just some. She's very distressed by the fact that you guys just opened this and broke into his battalion facility. But you get the impression she definitely will not be talking about this to anyone.
Excellent.
Hey, we're on the right path.
If only because of the fear of her being killed horribly for it.
Excellent.
Elise doesn't seem as like, she just sort of shrugs. She doesn't care.
All right, let's go in and see what's up with this water.
All right. So the pump is a little old and ornery, but once you get it going, the water seems clean and pure, or clean and pure for European standards. You know,
Yeah.
if you were in Gibraltar at a palace or something, it would be considered, you know, subpar. It should be, you know, filtered, and then, you know, minerals should be added to it for flavor. But, you know, it's perfectly serviceable. There doesn't seem to be any contamination in it. It's maybe a little bit, you know, you don't know if you necessarily drink it. You might get like Montezuma's revenge from it, but it wouldn't be dangerous to crops, at least.
All right. Is there anything that suggests someone could add a property to the water at a point in time and it clear out after a while, or?
Perhaps it seems to be drawing from groundwater. Though there might be an underground cistern as well. You're not really sure how the Spitalians set up this facility. Given the fact that it's locked up, and the way Hild describes it, it sounds like it's guarded during the year when people would actually be coming by, and the Spital's just not bothering to send anyone out this close to winter because no one's pumping water for the farms anymore. As far as you can tell, it seems like if someone did mess with it, it would be the absolutely most dangerous and difficult way to.
Okay. Unless it was a Spitalian.
Unless it was a Spitalian. But even then, like, you don't know if there would be a way for them to be 100% sure who would be getting the water.
That's fair. Yeah.
Poisoned. Only Hilda's farm was affected, so it seems it would be difficult to. It seems unlikely that if someone were to target just Hilda's farm, they'd do this. You know, like if they had targeted the well, you're pretty sure, given just what you've seen how it's set up, it would have been more than just one farm that had issues.
All right, Murata, what do you think?
So we're sure this is the only farm that's having issues?
Yeah, that's what the reports give out, and none of the other farmers are having issues or complaints.
Yeah, if anyone else had any problems, they didn't talk about them, and if they had issues like Hilda's issues, they'd be talking about them. Like, Hilda's crops are entirely, like, there's not a single part of the field that made it to harvest without dying.
Well, that tells us something anyway. That means something happened here that it didn't happen at any other farm. So
yeah,
that's what we're looking for. So we can rule out the water since other farms use that. Is there anyone that tends to this farm that doesn't tend to any others? Is there anything that makes this farm unique that could be tampered with, or a person that could have been bribed, or anything like that? Threatened?
Hilda thinks for a moment. She says, Gideon and his brothers would never do anything like that. They're pretty honorable. I mean, you know, it's hard to say never. You know, it's
Because you never know
you
until
never
it
know what
happens.
people are up to. But she says, you know, the we all grew up here together, and we've all been here for years and years. And if Gideon were to cause any trouble, he'd be causing it with the Jehammedans, not with me. Um, she says, and if he were to, I, I think that if he were just trying to get the Jehammedans in trouble, he'd have poisoned his own field before poisoning my own.
Hmm.
She says he's not the sort who would inflict any suffering on others unless he felt they deserved it.
That might be true. They might be more likely to mess with the. Who did you say they were more likely to mess with?
The Jehammedans.
The Jehammedans. But maybe the Jehammedans are more likely to mess with them.
Probably,
Do you know
but
if they have any enemies, or if they have any weaknesses that might be exploited that would make them vulnerable, like a
the Jehammedans or
no, the workers of the field.
Gideon?
Anything that someone could use against them to get them to do something to this field.
Neither Hilda or Elise can think of something. Gideon and his brothers are pretty simple folk. And the Anabaptists, they're you can't really blackmail Anabaptists because they're if they have done something, they can be held to account for it, but they typically their response is, oh well, I'll have to do better next time. Like they're not super into guilt and punishment and whatnot. Maybe if you had something that the judges would be interested in, you'd say, hey, I'll take this to the judges. But I mean, the Anabaptists tend to be a little bit uncouth, a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit uncultured, but they're deeply religious, and they don't tend to, do anything that's too extreme.
Unless it's in the name of their religion, could that be something?
Perhaps, but like Elise already sort of made reference to this. Like if the Anabaptists and the Jehammedans, who are sort of rival religious factions, if they want trouble, they'll get in trouble with each other, but they won't try and hide it. So the Anabaptists might go and steal some goats or something.
Who stands to be harmed most by the destruction of this field?
Well, on a small scale basis, Hilda, since she has to pay for the sort of parcel next year. It's sort of on a sharecropping basis that the farms of the rebel are leased out. So she'd have to pay for getting the farm next year, and she'd have to, feed herself during the winter and everything. So she obviously has lost quite a bit from her crop dying. On a large scale, in theory, an attack on the crops would be an attack on Justitian itself. And so you'd have the judges, you'd have the Spitalians, you'd have the chroniclers, you'd have a whole bunch of people who suddenly get very angry. But yet, this is one field, and it's not particularly prosperous and not particularly large.
So it looks like the person who stands most to lose might be Hilda. So yeah. I would look for her enemies or someone who might want to do her harm.
Yeah. It might mean we have to go over to the Jehammedans to inquire with them. maybe we could spend a couple more hours looking over the farm. Maybe there's tracks.
Well, Gamal, didn't you have that conversation with Ada before? Or no, it wasn't you. It was our other party member who talked to Ada.
Yeah, it was Ray who had the conversation. But I think she did catch you up on it, right?
Yeah.
Did she tell us about the
I
affair?
thought so for the. I thought for the most part.
Um, but Ada didn't. I'm trying to remember what exactly was in that conversation. I probably should have written it down.
Like I have notes on it, and I don't think she
great
filled this
GM.
in completely on what the deal was, but she said that there was definitely.
Yeah, she
something.
told you that Wald had chosen not to help Hilda. So you're not 100% certain what's up with that. But I don't think she really had anything else that seems immediately useful. I mean, Ada's kind of sheltered. She doesn't. You don't know that she's left the mansion since it was built. You know.
Okay, so never mind. I'm gonna take that clue back. So,
Bump.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily unimportant. It's just not actionable yet.
Does Hilda know where her sons are now?
Where whose sons? As far as you're aware, Hilda doesn't. You mean Gideon and her neighbors? Gideon should still be at his homestead. He hasn't gone into Justitian for the winter yet.
Okay. I guess the only other thing I would want to do is ask Hilda, who is the last person to fertilize the crops?
Gideon would have been.
Gideon? Okay.
Is it possible that someone could have destroyed this field without ever physically touching it? Is there anything someone could have done without tampering with the soil, water, seed, ground? Could it be a distance type curse thing?
Hilda shrugs. Neither her nor Elise know of anything like that ever happening. She says, I do sometimes worry that, she says, because I'm on, her farm is, so I should have drawn a map of it. Her farm's like at the sort of, the rubbles divided into like a grid, and Hilda's farm is right off one of the major roads at sort of like an intersection. And so you have like Hilda and Gideon and the other farmers, and then going off, so like across the street, it goes out, and that's sort of like the boundary of the rubble, like they're right out on the very edge. And then if you were to go the opposite way and still be in the rubble, that's sort of where the Jahamdans have set up camp. And so you don't know. She says potentially, she says people could come from outside and mess with it as well. I often hear things at night, but I can't really do anything about it. I've never gone up and found anything in my field, but She says, I don't often run out into the night. It's kind of dangerous out here.
Yeah. When was the last time you heard such noises?
She says, pretty frequently. She says, I heard, even since the field's gone bad, I've heard things out there in the night.
Well, maybe we should spend the night, see if we can accost whatever noise is creating this, or whatever creature is creating this noise.
And in doing so, maybe accost the creature that's destroying the field.
Yeah, that's my hope. Hill, do you mind if we spend the night?
Be my guest. She says, I don't have any like food or I'm afraid I can't be very much of a host, but
That's
you're
fine.
welcome to stay.
Get bread.
Yeah, Teague will just sleep under your bed. Probably another house in of itself too.
You still have most of the day though, if you wanted to check out stuff a little more.
Yeah, I'll check out the crops, kind of do some experiments on it, see what exactly is causing it to die. Is it like malnutrition? Is it a what sort of chemical is causing it to kind of just fizzle out?
All right. You keep noticing that there's some. You're not entirely sure. It might not be the cause of the problems, but there's a lot of sulfur you're catching.
Is there what role would I do to like try to figure out so if sulfur has been introduced, is there any natural way for it to be introduced, or would someone have to have brought it in?
I mean, you're not entirely sure. It's in a very high concentration. Like it's in a like insanely high concentration. Like you're not sure that it would be the thing that killed the plants, but it seems possible.
Yeah.
Um, but
So something's producing sulfur or putting sulfur on these items. They're kind of concentrated on several areas of the field.
Normally, sulfur would be good for the soil and plants, but it depends on what concentration.
Yeah, it looks like these are having a negative effect on these particular plants.
it might also depend on like what it's mixed with, because
Yeah.
sulfur's very easy to detect for a person, but the chemicals that are also in whatever might not be so
Yeah.
obvious. At least sort of says, okay, I think you guys have it from here. I'm gonna head back to the mansion. If you need anything, you can find me there.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing us. I'll leave.
Hilda suggests that you check with Gideon and talk to him.
Where can he be found?
He is. She motions to like down the road a little. She says he's my next door neighbor down that way.
Oh, all right then. I guess we'll pay him a visit.
Are we taking some of the plants with us?
Yeah, why not?
like maybe a little stock or two.
Yeah, some samples.
Okay, so I have an idea.
All right.
I may have to roll for it though in order to bring it to fruition. So this will be my first time rolling.
Well, what do you want to try to do?
So I'm going to try to communicate to everyone that the reason sulfur kills plants is because it raises the acidity of the soil, and if the acidity of the soil is too high, it'll kill everything. So if sulfur is truly the reason behind the destruction of the field, then the solution is to make the soil more basic by adding limestone or crushed lime. So that's
Yeah, you don't need to really test for that. That's
okay.
something, if you have intellect science, you could figure that out.
I mean, I
without-
have 2 things in science. I just didn't know if I needed to.
Yeah,
roll.
acids and bases and stuff. You're able to
So
catch that.
if we can test the pH of the soil to see where it's at, we'll know where we need to get it. Because the pH has to be at least above 5.5. But preferably around 7 would be the good.
Yeah. So when you arrive at Gideon's place, they've also boarded up and everything, and you get the impression that some people have already left for Justitian, but you see a man about the same age as Hilda and Ada and Wald, and like same generation as the rest of them, and he's sort of looking over the house, sort of checking it from every angle to make sure that it's sealed up tight. He doesn't notice you approaching until you get pretty close, unless you call out to him or
Hey, Mumarada, why don't you say hi to him?
Marhaba.
When Gideon sees you, he sort of jumps back. He's not expecting to see strangers at this time in this place. Who are you? And why are you here? And he looks not necessarily hostile, but he definitely looks defensive. Like he was hammering a board into the sort of wall of the house, and he keeps the hammer not like raised and ready, but like if he needed to swing it, he's still got it, sort of in a defensive grip.
Hi, I'm Kamal. This is Mumarada, and that's Teague. We're investigating the crops over at Hilds.
When he hears you say this, he eases up quite a bit. He sort of lets the hammer fall, sort of like a natural, like holding pose instead of a defensive pose, and he says, "Shame that is," he says. "We put so much work and so much time into that field just for it to fail."
I'm getting a weird vibe from this guy. I'm gonna roll empathy to see like if he really is sorry for Hild, because he sounds creepy to me.
All right.
I only got 1 success.
You're not 100% certain, but he does seem a little sort of forlorn. Maybe he doesn't care all that much.
But what
Um,
is he forlorn about is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
but when he talks about Hild, you get the feeling that he definitely sympathizes with Hild. He maybe doesn't care as much about the field, but he does feel bad for her.
You have any idea what could have caused something like that?
He says, "My money's on the Mohammedans."
Yeah, that's where everyone's money is on. And why
Well,
do you
but
think that?
cannot pin who did it.
Hmm?
I think the question was, do you have any idea how that could occur? You've taken care of this field for how long now?
She said, or Gideon thinks for a while, and you can tell he's having problems with the numbers. He's like counting on his hands. She says, "Well, Hilda's son left for the judges. He keeps counting and like not being certain." Says,
Would you say it's long
years
enough?
ago.
So long that you have trouble keeping count, it seems. So that means you should be intimately familiar with crops, the field itself, any differences. So
He says,
talk to me
"Well,
about
really it was only 4 years ago when Max died that we started helping her out. But um,
talk to me about the changes that you've seen in the field. You must have noticed some physical changes, new smells, new feeling of the soil. Someone who's been doing this for 4 years would know if there was something a little off. Even if you didn't think it was pertinent then, just think as hard as you can. Tell me any little difference that you might have noticed.
He says, we mostly help Hilda with the planting and the harvest, because those are the times when you really need people working the soil. And we went to try and help her with the harvest, and we looked out and everything was dead or dying. The battalions would never take grain from a field that was going that way. So thought it might be blight, but he motions to his own field, which is empty now, but clearly, it's been harvested. Like it didn't, there's no like dead crops there. It was harvested and everything. He says, like our own fields were fine. He says, I would have assumed it was a blight of some kind, but he says one field. He shakes his head no, and he walks you over to the boundary fence. He says, if this is, there's only like a foot between the two fields. There's no. Says if whatever had gotten into her field had been disease, it would have spread over to ours. He says, I don't. So that's why I think it has to be the Mohammedans. Says,
Or at
I
least
don't know
someone doing it.
how they did it, but my money is on them doing it. They always want more land. So
I'm going to quietly tell just Gemel that I think I'm going to say, I think this guy doth protest too much. He's trying really hard to pin this on that. It's making me a little, suspicious.
Yeah, it might very well be her neighbors, which have been messing up her crops. Nonetheless, he has a big hammer.
It's not that big a hammer.
It's bigger than what I got.
I mean, you have the advantage of numbers. You'd possibly take him in a fight. He says, "You're welcome to look over my field if you want."
Yeah, I'd like that. You mind if we look over your farming equipment as well?
He says, "Certainly, feel free." He says, "Anything to help solve the problem." This is not that really, you can't really solve the past, but you can try and make things, keep it from happening again.
All right. And I'll go kind of do a test on them, see if see any sulfur or test the soil as well.
There's definitely some sulfur here as well. It's not quite as strong.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if it's really sort of a matter of magnitudes or anything, but if you had to, there's less salt, but not terribly much less. It's you know the rubble and Justitian northern Borca is basically just all salt and
Yeah.
dust on the wind. So it's an unpleasant place to be when the dust storms pick up, and crops don't like it either. And and being further from the boundary is better for everyone involved. Um, but the soil actually seems pretty similar, but definitely the sulfur is a little less.
Huh. All right. Did you guys want to investigate anything further, or should we call it for today and or maybe check out some of the other farms? But I am curious about who's walking around at night.
Teek's gonna ask Gideon, has he been noticing anything at night?
He thinks for a moment and says, there are, whenever winter comes around, there are strange folk who come into Justitian, scrappers and nomads and all sorts of folk that he tries not to sound horribly xenophobic because he's looking at a paler and two Nubians, and he's you don't gather that he's a particularly sophisticated man, but he's got just enough savvy to realize that he doesn't want to be too rude to outsiders when he's talking about him.
He's hinting physically, but it's going over Teek's head, and she's just
he continues. He's like, I mean, I haven't seen roving bands of outlaws or cannibals or anything, but I mean, there are a lot of folks who don't do honest work with the land who pass through here all the time. So I don't know if they would have any interest in harming Hild. I would think certainly they would be more prone to steal or do other stuff than corrupt the soil. Says, which is why I again blame the Mohammedans, because they're the sort of people who would do it just to put a finger in the eyes of the people of Justitian after we took them in so kindly. You gathered that Gideon is not an easygoing personality. He he doesn't like things, and he doesn't like quite a few different things.
Yeah.
The last thing she's gonna ask before going back to her group. Do you have fertilizer? Do you share the same, or do you make your own?
He says, "Yes, we." He motions up to the silo up on the hill. He says, "The battalions provide us with fertilizer and pesticides and fungicide and all this stuff to keep the plants growing well."
And they are used liberally throughout several different fields? Or is it one fertilizer per field?
He says the person with the claim for the land has to bring it to the battalions, and they will give them the fertilizer. He says, but as far as I know, he thinks for a moment. He says, I don't know if says I think they give everyone the same fertilizer.
And we see yours.
He says, I've put it all in my field. He says pretty much everyone does. He says if this batal catches you hoarding it, trying to sell it or whatever, they come after you pretty harshly. He says you can't get another permit for the land, or says they'll deny you your application for the next year. And while it's always very clear that we cannot stockpile the fertilizer, he says you put it on when they tell you to put it on, and unfortunately I don't have any left.
Okay. I'm gonna bow and scuttle off into his field and scoop up a small sample and bring it to Gamal for testing.
Yeah, good idea. I guess if there's nothing else here, we should head back, right?
Well, unless we're staying here at least for the night to investigate the strange. So I figure we stay here, but I think someone needs to keep an eye on him.
On this guy right here?
Yeah.
Guess we could do our best, but I'm not really stealthy.
Yeah, the problem with keeping an eye on Gideon is he's got a lot of nice open harvested fields and everything, and his homestead is basically boarded up. If you stick around to watch him, he basically finishes up closing up the house and he goes to talk to Hild.
Do you want to sneak back inside his house while he's gone?
Ooh, we could, yeah. Push our luck.
Is there a specific tool that he uses just to spread fertilizer? Because if that's so, even if he has used all of it, if he only uses that tool to spread fertilizer, it would still have traces that we could test.
Yeah. Yeah, let's sneak in and see if we can grab one.
My total lack of knowledge of farming is a limiting factor here, but I don't think he has anything really that he would use. The Jahamidans give it to them in like sacks and pouches.
Well, he has to plant the seeds of the burger tree, and then the tree gets big, and then they produce these little burgers, and it's great.
I imagine they might mix it with the water at some point when they're watering. So, but I honestly have no clue how it works. I have no clue how it works in Degenesis either, because even if you know how it works in reality, it's been
Yeah.
500 years of not a lot of
mean,
technology.
yeah. I mean, in real
Um,
life, if you don't spread it, like all the fertilizer
yeah,
in the world isn't gonna help you if you
yeah,
don't.
they definitely spread it. I'm just not sure how.
Right.
Um, Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have any tool he uses
Hmm.
just for spreading
Right.
fertilizer. Like
And it's not like he labeled them.
everything is covered in a nice layer of red soil. Um,
I guess we
you
could
don't.
test them all to see if any of them have high uh, sulfur.
Yeah.
So maybe like a shovel or the end of a spade, maybe.
Yeah. Good
Um,
point.
well, fertilizer has to be spread pretty thin and on the surface. So I would test like a rake or like a hoe or a rake first, and then move to the deeper digging tools.
Yeah, we tested hose.
So you do manage to sort of figure out where there's some fertilizer and stuff. Unfortunately, without anything to compare it to, it's hard to tell if there's anything funky going on.
Right.
Wait, we do have something to compare it to. It's the crop sample that we had from Hilda.
Yeah.
Because couldn't we mash it down with your science contraptions
Science.
and then
Pull out my beaker.
So as far as you can tell, make an intellect science test.
Oh yeah.
All of us?
Anyone, doesn't matter who.
Okay, just a refresher though. What counts as a success and what counts as a
4 and higher is a success. Then if you get to 6,
Correct
that's a
what?
trigger. And a trigger gives you potential bonus effects.
Yeah. 4, 5, and 6 are successes, with a 6 being a trigger, like a crit type thing.
And intellect what are we?
Science.
Intellect science.
All right, and we roll the amount of dice that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you would have combined between the attribute and the skill. So for instance,
Yeah, I have
like if you had a body of 2 and a melee of 3, you'd roll 5 dice.
Okay, so I have 2, so I got a 4 and a 3.
All right. Did anyone roll better than 1 success?
yeah, I got a 4 successes with 2 triggers.
All right. That will definitely do it. So the soil seems different,
Mhm.
but sort of taking your time and analyzing it and testing, there's nothing in one soil that isn't in the other. It's just the balance seems different.
Mm. Hmm.
So you don't think if there is something in the field, it's something either you're not detecting in the soil or it's to do with that balance.
All right. So I mean, everything in this and the other share the same components. It's just the Hildsfield just has a higher concentration of the sulfur.
Yeah, it's got a little more salt and a little more sulfur compared to the soil.
So it
But
looks
the
like
soil's
someone definitely tampered with the soil and successfully destroyed it and whoever did it was very knowledgeable in the quickest and most effective manner of ensuring that crops don't grow.
Yeah.
Because not everyone knows that salt and sulfur destroys crops.
well, salt they're pretty aware of around here. They know that if you don't try and balance out the salt as it comes in, you're going to have problems. Though they don't really have particularly good ways to do it, but they do know, like, hey, if there's a problem, it could be the salt.
Okay. So yeah, did you guys just want to stay the night and see who's messing around?
Yeah, why not?
Sounds good to me.
We'll do it. A little camp out.
All right. Hilda lets you know that she's planning on leaving for Justitian in the morning.
Hmm. Oh.
She says, "I'm not gonna try and stay out here and by myself now that everyone else has gone into the city."
Oh, well, congratulations. We'll just stay out here in the cold.
She says, "Sorry, I know it must be not super fun for you guys out here, but the rough weather and everything. Certainly no Hispania."
Well, we'll be in the city soon, but thank you for letting us stay here.
She says, "You're welcome. You are helping me after all."
Hopefully. Hopefully. So yeah, we'll sleep in your place then.
All right.
Just hunker down for the night. Keep watch.
Make me a perception test, everyone.
No.
That's instinct perception, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Instinct.
I should know what the ability or what the skills are called. I've only worked on the game.
It's fine.
I did the community quick start guide too, so I did like the super duper summary rules. So hopefully I don't forget stuff.
Hopefully. I got one success with a trigger.
I've got 4 successes.
Ooh.
And I guess no, I don't think that would be a trigger though.
Any 6 counts as a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But triggers aren't really usually necessary.
Oh, okay.
And Teague also actually probably should get a bonus for this because it's at night, but Palers tend to do better at night.
Oh yeah, because I'm a nightmare, dude. There you go.
Yeah.
Nope, that extra one didn't help.
You hear people passing along the road outside. And you also hear something rustling in the field.
Okay, I'm gonna go up to the least boarded up window just to peek out and see who's passing by.
And those are 2 separate things during the night, by the way, so we'll handle them separately. You see people. It looks like they have some sort of lantern or something. And there's maybe you can see in the light of the lantern maybe 5 or 6 people, but they're sticking to the road. They're not like hopping over the fence onto Hilda's land. They talk a little, but they're far enough away, and there's enough of a wind that you can't really make out what it is they're saying.
Can I see if they're Jihadin or Anti-Baptist?
So they're wearing black clothes, which the Mohammedans might wear black. You're not super familiar with them, or at least Teague's not super familiar with them. But you've never seen Mohammedans wearing black. They don't tend to wear terribly ostentatious clothes, but they do often have clothes dyed, like deep dark colors. But it would be unusual for them to wear black. And Anabaptists always just wear plain cloth. So potentially they might wear black if they're harvesting like black wool or something from something, but they would probably not be wearing black out here at night.
Can I kind of see where they're heading?
It looks like they're heading toward the city. They're just going down the road, so there's only a certain number of options. So they're heading towards the station. You're not sure if that's their destination or not, because there's you're on sort of like the outer edge of the rubble, so there's places they could be going other than just into the city itself. But you don't know of anywhere else they'd be going. It doesn't. And like they do seem to be like moving. They're not moving slow on like a patrol or something. They're moving at like a traveler's pace.
Okay, so I'll just note that and slink back into the house.
And then later on in the evening, closer to like midnight, you hear something rustling out in the field.
I'm gonna go out without waking anybody.
Okay.
It'll be great.
It's always great. Always.
Are you gonna sort of approach the source of the noise, or are you?
I would like to very stealthily attempt to locate the noise coming from the field.
All right. Make a stealth test, please.
Okay, so for stealth, is that going to be agility and stealth?
Yeah, agility, stealth.
Okay.
And because if you have the nightmare potential, which I think you said you do, you get an additional +1 die. So you'll have that +1.
That is 4. And out of my 4, I got 2 successes. So what's happening?
All right. I need to actually roll a couple dice really quick. Oh no. So you are sort of sneaking through this field and you hear something sort of snooping about. And you hear like a sniffing sound. And there's not many clouds out, so you have sort of like a very dim vision of everything around you. Because you're paler, you're actually able to make out shapes and stuff pretty well.
Nice.
But sort of going out into the field as you follow the noise, the crops, they're dead, but they're still, they're standing maybe a foot tall or so, and so they're swaying a little in the wind, sort of breaking up the visuals. And you notice that there's like a still spot in the field where you see sort of like a round shape. And then something, like one end of it moves and you see like an animal's eyes reflecting moonlight back at you.
Oh, I was just about to ask, is this human? No, it's clearly not human. This is okay, so that is clearly a thing. I'm not very athletic at all.
I believe in you.
I'm gonna grab, like, I guess a broom or one of the spades I saw earlier from the equipment is in the barn hut, and just start sprinting towards it.
Are you gonna wake anyone else first, or are you just gonna do this?
Go.
Heck no, this is my battle.
Get it.
All right. Um, so I guess we're gonna start with combat then. So the way combat works is you'll roll psyche plus reaction. You can also burn up to 3 ego, and that you just add that as bonus dice onto that and your first action in combat. I strongly suggest that you always burn ego in combat when you can, because combat is very lethal.
Okay, so looking back on my character sheet, is it the filled in blocks that count for ego?
Yes. Or no. Let me. So are you using the character creator website?
I do. I have the.
All right. So it's the white boxes that are your ego.
Oh, okay. So I have 12 ego. And then do I need to know my spore infestations as well?
Nope,
Or...
just ego.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and grabbing the spade. I'm gonna start sprinting towards the creature thing, and I'm gonna try and jab it in what I think is probably its face.
All right, so make a psyche reaction test because it knows you're there and you know it's there, so you're starting combat.
Okay, so for psyche, I have 3. Do I need to add willpower to that or
reaction?
Reaction. Okay, so I have 0 reaction, but I'm gonna burn 1 ego for that. So
I strongly suggest using 3.
3 ego for that. All right, cool.
Yeah, ego takes a while to recover, but
you don't want to die.
All
yeah,
right.
I was gonna say ego recovers faster than everything else you might lose during combat.
All right, so first combat, burning 3 ego plus the 3 there. I have 3 successes.
Do you have any triggers?
Out of the 6, 1 trigger.
All right, so you will go first.
Okay.
I
forgot what my things are.
So to attack with a spade, you'll use body melee.
Body melee? Okay, so for me, body melee, body is 3 and melee is 3.
Don't die.
All right, and you'll add 3 from your ego, so you'll be rolling 9. And I
3
feel a lot better about this fight now that I hear you have 3 body and 3 melee.
Okay. Oh boy, do I have enough dice? You know what? I'll just roll that set twice then. So first one. Second set. Okay. And then that's that again. Okay. So out of 9, I have 5 successes and 2 triggers.
Ooh.
All right, what's your body plus force?
So body plus force is 3.
All right, so you don't have any extra dots in force. So you add a spade does 3 plus force over 3 damage. So you'll add 1 point for having body of 3. And then you add 2 damage for the trigger. So you do 6 damage to the creature. And it growls and snarls. And it lunges at you in the dark. Actually, it's down a die. Because it wasn't in perfect shape when it started this fight. You hear it growl, and you see the large sort of wolf-like head of a Gendo Um, it looks
Kind of.
diseased and a little bit like not misshapen, but like it's not in its prime. Um, and it clamps down on your like it managed to like get its teeth around your leg, but you managed to shake it off. But it does hurt quite a bit. Do you have any armor?
Let's see. So armor. Do. Where would that be? Oh, that is a negative.
All right. So you're gonna take 7 damage.
Okay. And then how do I mark that as?
On the online character sheet, they don't have any way to record temporary stuff, so I just write it
Yeah.
down somewhere. And then the next round starts.
You can do it.
Eh.
So you'll need to roll Psyche Reaction again. And I will roll for it. All right. Ooh. You can burn Ego again as well. It will give you not only extra dice on your roll, but it will also give you extra dice on your first action.
Okay. So that brings me down to 3 ego left.
Didn't you have 12 to begin?
Yeah, and I burned it twice. So.
No, you only have to spend it once.
Oh, just once?
So you spend when you roll initiative, and then you're covered for the next action, too. So what's your result on initiative?
So for that, I got only 3 successes.
You still got more than it did.
Oh, okay.
Did you get any triggers?
No triggers.
Okay. So do you want to just attack it again?
Yeah. Jab,
Now
jab.
you have more than 7 flesh wounds, right?
Nope, I only have 6.
Okay, so you are taking a -1 die penalty going forward.
Okay.
From being in trauma.
Okay.
So I think you'll roll 8 dice, right, on your attack.
For the attack.
Because you would have been rolling 9 before the trauma penalty.
Oh, yeah. So I would roll 8.
Yep.
Okay. 2. So that is 6 successes and 1 trigger.
All right. So you swing at it again, and you hear this like meaty whack as you connect with it with the spade. And you don't see where it flies off to in the dark, but you hear it land with a thud. You knock it off its feet, and it rolls down the embankment into the field.
Dang. Okay. So.
And as far as you're aware, it doesn't get back up. You're not sure if it's dead or not, but it's certainly dying if it's not dead.
Okay. So at this point, is there anything around me that can kind of pin it where it is? Like, could I stab it in its foot and it'll keep it there?
If you have a suitable thing for it, yeah.
Cool. I'll roll for that. There you go. Would that be body and melee?
You're just stabbing it through with something.
Yeah, just to make sure it stays there while I run off.
Yeah. Uh, Hilda has like a spare fence post, and you just grab it, and you're not super strong, so it's kind of hard to get it through. But you just sort of like lean your weight down, and you feel like a crunch as it goes straight through the beast and into the ground. Um, it's kind of difficult to know how deep it gets into the ground because it's pretty cold out and the soil's pretty hard at night. But um, you you don't think the creature's going to move on its own power anytime soon.
Good. Stay there. Be right back. So I'll scuttle back into the house and very loudly wake everybody else up.
Like, oh God, what is it now, Teague?
I found it. There's a thing in the yard. You have to come see. Come see.
Oh
What's happened?
God.
So I lead them back over to the creature where I put the fence post into it. There.
What is it?
Meanwhile, Teague's just got her leg bitten open.
Yeah. Yeah, Mumurata, why don't you help Teague out with her leg, and I'll look over this creature.
Sounds good to me.
Don't heal it too well. I would like to keep the scar.
Oh well, I'm not really great with medicine. That's more so her, and she's looking at your leg. I'm just trying to figure out what this is.
Yeah, you've never seen a Gendo yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You've actually seen a dead one before because they're sort of hunted as not quite like it wouldn't be worthy of a big game hunter, but you've seen Neolibians hunt them before.
Yeah.
It's sort of in between, sort of the little game and the big game on the hunting hierarchy. And so if you want to be a hunter and you've never hunted a Gendo, it's sort of a mark of shame, as it were. So you've seen one before. You've never seen one up close that's recently dead. You've seen like a mounted head of one once. Mm-hmm. This one looks like it's diseased and not in great shape, hungry, starving. Gendos are pretty bold creatures. They're big and they're violent, but they typically roam in packs. And this one, you don't see any indication that it's part of a pack in any sort. You don't hear other Gendos or see other Gendos.
Yeah.
Like if it were in a pack, probably also there would have been other signs.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because by itself, you wouldn't see. You wouldn't expect. You'd expect to see like droppings or tracks or something if there were a bunch of them, but one by itself is easy enough to miss.
Mumurata needs to roll medicine.
Yes.
She can help Teague.
Mm-hmm. So the rules for that are in Catharsis, but you can just roll and I'll tell you the result. And I find it. The rules are in battle, so it's on page 113 of Catharsis. But basically, you'll roll an intelligence medicine test.
And that's 6-sided die?
Yep.
And what's a success?
4,
anything 4 or higher. And a 6 is a trigger, which gives you a bonus.
Okay, I got 2 successes.
All right, so you look at Teague's leg and you're able to bandage it up. Teague, you regain 1 flesh wound. If you had more time, you could work on her leg to try and treat the injuries, but it would take 12 hours or so it takes a little while to get that working. You might wait to do it until you're in a better situation and not out here in the field.
Sounds good.
Plus I'm wiggling around, just like, yeah, leave it.
So can I figure out what's causing this thing to be so sick and weird?
Make an intellect medicine test.
Mumorada, can you take a look at this?
You got.
Or alternatively a perception test, whichever works for you.
Let's do both.
Yeah.
I like to roll. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Roll.
Roll on.
Oh, I only got one success.
On medicine or perception?
Medicine.
All right. You can't tell what exactly diseases or whatnot it has. It doesn't look rabid, so that's good news. But it's the starving thing is really easy to diagnose. You can see its ribs, and everything. It's got like an old wound that didn't heal right. But you don't really know where the other diseases and whatnot that are afflicting it come from. But it definitely was not in good shape to begin with.
I got 3 successes, 1 trigger for a perception check.
All right, you notice it has some of the sort of dead, rotted grains in its mouth, like it's been trying to feed on them.
Interesting.
You don't really see anything else useful just with perception, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so actually, I think this is a good spot to end it for the night, right? As we look at this thing, and after Teague had her epic battle.
That sounds awesome.
I thought Paler was supposed to have machine guns, man.
No, you're thinking of the other game.
We're getting you a machine gun.
I am a soft, squishy information machine. That's it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone for coming to watch the show. Once again, you can always check out Penny for a Tale here on this channel. We also have a website at pennyforatale.wixsite.com/pennyforatale. Once again, that's pennyforatale.wixsite.com/pennyforatale to check out events, players, podcasts, blogs, contact us, everything you could ever want. It's awesome. We want to thank Nerdy Nursey for joining us this evening and representing Nubians.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I loved it.
You can, of course, check her out at twitch.tv/nerdynursey. And I believe her Facebook's the same, right?
Yes, everything is Nerdy Nursey except for Twitter, which is nerdy_nursey. But
yeah, it's always Twitter that's weird because I have Penny for a Tale and it's spelled the same way except for Twitter where I have to use the number 4. Yeah.
And it's so sad because when you look up who has the name you want, it's always like a person with 1 follower who hasn't posted in like 5 years. You're like, just give me the address.
Give me that. We're gonna hunt them down. That's next session.
I think Degenesis itself had something like that, where like there was someone using Degenesis who
that's
like,
funny.
They were like out of business for like 3 years. I don't remember the story.
Yeah.
Someone else would remember it better than I do.
And of course, Jasmine playing Teague. Thank you. You can find her at twitch.tv/geekynomad. And I believe is your Twitter the same?
Well, funny story. Had to change my socials recently because someone else had the same name, but they have again posted in like 6 years or so, and they have a bigger following. So it's _ the Geeky Nomad, and then everywhere else should be the same.
Awesome. And for those watching on YouTube
Twitter.
and podcasts and stuff, all this information will be right below in the detail section. And then thank you again, Kyle, for joining us tonight and GMing. We will see everyone in 2 weeks. And make sure you check out the events to see what other amazing things are coming out. And especially the October 13th special Penny for a Tale announcement. We have something very special lined up It's going to be very hard for me to keep it secret up till then, but I will try my best and tantalize you with it. Other than that, I will see everyone at PAX Unplugged and some other times. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right, have a good one, everyone.